Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a video that has been in the planning for quite a while and that quite a few of you have asked me to do. So as you can see from the title of the video, I'm talking about how I survived my PGCE year. For anyone who is outside of the UK, PGCE is the teacher training year, so it's the postgraduate certificate of education. I feel like I should be more confident in what it actually stands for, but yeah, it's basically the degree that you have to take to be qualified to be a teacher here in the UK. And I finished mine in June of this year, so June 2021, the time I'm filming this. And I've had quite a few questions and people just wanting to know how it worked, so I thought I would sit down and put it all in one video, and hopefully you guys will have a better understanding of what I've been doing this year. So I have got like a little list of things I want to talk about, which is unusual preparation for me for a video, so I'm going to kind of prop it down here. So the first thing I want to talk about is what I was doing before and why I wanted to get into teaching and how I did that. So I worked in property for 10 years. I was a property manager for various different companies, and so what that meant is that I had a portfolio of properties that were my responsibility to look after. So the negotiators would go find tenants for a property, put them in, and then from the moment they were in the property until after they had left, it was up to me to make sure they were okay, make sure the landlord was happy, get any repairs done, do property visits, make sure all the safety certificates were in place, all that kind of stuff. And it was a job I did for a long time. It was an industry that I know really well. It probably sounds a bit big-headed, but it was a job I was good at, because you had to be organised, you had to work under pressure because everybody wants everything yesterday and everything is really urgent all the time, and you have to learn to like prioritise. It was quite varied because there was always like different things happening, and I got to go and do property visits sometimes, so I get out of the office. It was a job I enjoyed, it was a job I was good at, but I just didn't feel fulfilled by it. And like my main achievement at the end of every day would be an empty inbox, and that's absolutely fine if that's enough for somebody, that's absolutely great, but I was restless. And I'd always thought about teaching. Both of my degrees are in English, so I have an undergraduate Bachelor of Arts degree in English and creative writing, and then have a master's degree in writing for young people. So kind of teaching had always been something that was sort of hovering as a possibility, but I never felt confident enough to get up in front of a classroom of teenagers and talk, because it's quite a scary prospect. And then in my previous job, I had my own team for a while. I was a team leader and I had about 10 people who were reporting to me, and part of that I was sent for management training, which meant that I had to get over my fear of talking in front of other people, and it made me a lot more confident. And I just got to a point where I thought, I think I'm ready for something else. And I was like, I think it's teaching. So I went and did a day's work experience at one of the local high schools here, who were kind enough to have me in. And within about 10 minutes, I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. So that's what I was doing before. And then I just thought, this is it. And this was a good few years ago. This was before Booktube, before we got married. And I remember talking to Gary about it, and I was like, let's just get through the wedding. Not get through the wedding, but like, let's do the wedding, concentrate on that, and then afterwards we can look at whether this might be viable. So I stayed in my job for a couple more years after I had kind of thought I want to teach. And it took me a little while to actually get on and do it. So that's what I was doing and why. And then the application process, basically I applied and was accepted onto the PGCE course in January of 2019, to start the course in September of 2019. So I went through the process, which was a fairly simple just application form on the university website, on the UCAS website, which is how in the UK you apply to universities. I was invited for interview. It was a full day of interview, various like workshops and panels. I had to talk about a book that I would teach, or that I thought should go on the curriculum, and I chose Feminists Don't Wear Pink and Other Lies by Scarlett Curtis, and talked about how it would be a great starting point to start conversations with kids and to look at different aspects of feminism and the different things that feminism covers, and then get the kids to write their own kind of little, either a postcard or an essay or whatever, or a speech about feminism, what it means to them. So yeah, that was the book that I chose. and then a panel interview. And I got an email the following day to say that I had been accepted onto the course, which was really exciting. However, at the time, the British government said that you had to pass a GCSE level exam in English and in maths if you wanted to be a secondary school teacher. The English exam was really easy. I walked through it, it was fine, passed it on the first go. The maths exam, I just could not get through. And if you've been on my channel before, you might have seen a video called A New Label, which I'll link in the description. As it turns out, I have dyspraxia, dyscalculia. I'm also dyspraxic and dyslexic, but I do have dyscalculia, and that is why, I didn't know this at the time, but that is why I struggled so hard with the exam. I do have my maths GCSE, which took me several goes, but with this maths exam, I just couldn't pass it. And it got to a point where I had to give a certain amount of notice to my job. Didn't have time to take the maths exam again. I think I took it 5 or 6 times in the end, and just couldn't pass it. And it got to a point where I couldn't have another go at the exam and give enough notice to my job. And obviously I'm not going to give notice on my job if I don't know that I can definitely do the PGCE. So I withdrew, and I was really disappointed. There were a lot of tears. It was really frustrating, but I withdrew. And I spoke to Gary about it, my husband. He was like, okay, we'll get you a maths tutor so that you can reapply next year, and then we'll get you through the exam. And I was like, okay, that's what we'll do. So I withdrew from the course in the July, and then in the September, Boris Johnson announced that they were scrapping the entrance exams for teachers, so you didn't have to do the maths and the English exams. And I was like, amazing, okay, I'm going to reapply. So reapplied in the November time, so November 2019, I reapplied for the course. I was invited to interview, which I did in the end of January 2019. Can you see where sorry, the end of January 2020. Can you see what's gonna happen here? Was accepted onto the course. Invited for interview, went through the interview day again, was accepted, really excited, didn't need to do the maths exam, so I was like, I'm definitely going to do it now. My boss at the time in my old job, I was really good friends with, and I didn't want to basically lie to her for the next 6 months. So in February 2020, I told her, which was like a week or so later, I told her that I was going to be leaving in the July, because I was going to take August off and then start my course in September. And so she knew all about it. And then obviously the pandemic happened, and I don't know if I've said this before, but with the pandemic, I had been working in an office in Bath, and then various bits of the business got like shut down slowly, but property management was the thing that was staying open, because obviously we're responsible for safety, and you know, even with the pandemic happening, people's boilers break and toilets need fixing and all that stuff. So we'd stayed open, and I'd stayed in the Bath office, and I was actually the last person left in the office. And then I got a phone call from my manager one afternoon saying, right, you're going to be working from home from tomorrow, take as much stuff as you need for 2 weeks, because that's how long we think it's going to be. And I never went back to that office because obviously the pandemic happened. So that was the process that I went through to get onto the course. So it did take me 2 goes, but I got there in the end. Thankfully the maths exam had been scrapped. And I know it was probably to make sure you had a certain level of education, but in order to be a teacher here in the UK, you have to have a degree. First of all, like, you have to have that level of education, and to get into a degree you have to have your A levels, and to have your A levels you have to have your GCSEs. So everyone who is applying to be a teacher it should be taken as read that everyone's got that level of education. So I always thought it was a bit weird. I would never teach maths. If a kid ever asked me a maths question, I would tell them to go and find another adult, because I know that it's not my strong point, it's my weakest point. So I was always a bit baffled by them, but anyway, I was happy to see them go. So what's the next bit? So that's the application process. So I wanted to talk briefly about money. I know everyone's a bit weird about talking about money on the internet, and actually since I went through the process it's changed again, but I received a student loan, so I'll be paying that back, which is fine. I've already got loads of student loan from my first 2 degrees, and also a bursary. So at the time, the British government were offering bursaries to people that wanted to train to be teachers in certain subjects, and English was one of those subjects. It wasn't all subjects, which I personally think is ridiculous, because teachers are teachers. If we want people to train, they need to be supported to train. I couldn't have done it without the bursary, because obviously I have a mortgage and a family and, you know, other debts that needed looking after, and I need money to survive. So I couldn't have done it without the bursary. The bursary at the time for English was £12,000 a year, which is tax-free, so that's what I received from the government. And they announced earlier this year that they are removing the bursary for English from this academic year, which is just going to be a disaster. But that's what I received. So I had the usual student loan and then bursary of £12,000 from the English government that I don't have to pay back, and which meant that I could afford to train to become a teacher. So yeah, that was the money side of it. But please look into it where you live and look at all like if you're considering doing it, just look at all the current rules because it changes all the time. So that's the money stuff. And then let's talk about training in a pandemic. So I filmed a vlog my first 6 weeks, which I'll link, which I think I called PGCE in a pandemic, where I was working from home. It's been a time. Obviously everything has been more difficult since March of 2020, and everything has been more complicated and harder, and we've all had a lot more pressure. Training has been different. So prior to the pandemic, on the course that I did, because I went via Bath Spa University, you can do, it's called Schools Direct, I think. You either go directly into school and train on the job, or you go down the university route, which is what I did. So I had 6 weeks from September to mid-October of university lectures, which obviously was spent in my office upstairs, mostly in my pyjamas, if I'm honest, rather in the lecture halls at Bath University, which I was really sad about. Bath was where I did my first 2 degrees. I was really excited to go back and be on campus, and I've been up twice. Once to get my student ID and once to return to get some library books, so 3 times, and then once to return them. So that was sad, but though obviously not the worst thing that could happen. So I had 6 weeks of online lectures where they talked to us about pedagogy, so how to teach, and we did loads of safeguarding stuff, and we did subject specific lectures, and then but also lectures as a whole cohort, and it was really interesting few weeks, and I really enjoyed that. So I'll link that vlog, like I said, in the description. And then we went into placement. So prior to the pandemic we would have had 3 placements, because of the pandemic we only had 2, which was fine. My first placement was in quite a small school, about 400 kids, and I absolutely loved it. That is the school where I am now a teacher. I was lucky enough to interview and be offered a job just before Christmas, which is very exciting. And then from January to June was our second placement. My second placement was at a much bigger school. It's got around 2,000 kids. We started online, so we were online teaching from January to Easter in March. So that was a weird way to start teaching kids. I did have to do a bit of online teaching in my first placement, but I started in person, and that transition was a lot easier than the other way. Because obviously like the kids don't turn the cameras on, so you only get to see their avatars, and most of them have got like random pictures they found on the internet instead of pictures of themselves. So it was a very strange experience, but we got through it. I struggled more on my second placement than the first, and I think it's because the size of the school. It felt a lot more corporate. Don't get me wrong, it's a great school for the kids, but for me it felt like a very corporate environment, and as someone who had come from a corporate environment and wanted to get out of that, it was a bit like, oh, this is not what I want. But it did show me that the school that I had accepted a job at was the right school for me, so that was good. Obviously learned loads on both placements. It's a very, very intense process. So on my first placement I spent a week shadowing, so I was just watching other people teaching lessons, and then I gradually started to do the first part of the lesson, and then I did the first part and the end of the lesson, and then after about 3 weeks I was doing the whole lesson, and it was really scary. People are always like, is it not scary? Yes. It is scary. It's scary to stand up in front of a group of teenagers for the first time, and the second and the third, and more than that. It is scary, but it's also fantastic. It's the hardest job I've ever done. It's exhausting. It takes everything out of me. It's occasionally soul destroying, but it's also the best job I've ever done, and I just love it. I've also realised I've got the shiniest face ever today. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. You do your first placement is a shorter placement, and then the second one is a much longer one. You're assessed all the time. So when you're teaching lessons, whoever is observing you, because obviously you can't be left alone with the class until you're qualified, will be doing observations for you. Have one formal observation a week, which is this massive form that has to be filled in, but you're always getting feedback, so you have to get very used to being critiqued all the time and getting feedback constantly. You also are responsible for those classes. So once you've taken over, you then have marking to do. You have to do their assessments, you have to mark those, you have to make sure, you know, just keep an eye on the kids, make sure everyone's okay, report anything that needs dealing with. It's intense, it's really, really intense, and most of it I've loved, some of it I didn't. There have been tears, there's been a lot of anxiety and stress, but it's been worth it. It's been absolutely worth it. So yeah, so those are the placements. And then, like I said, I was lucky enough to interview for a job at my first school and got accepted just before Christmas. And the job application process for teaching is like nothing I've ever experienced. I've had a lot of jobs in my time, and the teaching application process is just one of a kind. So you fill out a massive application form, and I feel really lucky that I only had to do this once, because I've got other people that I know, both in my cohort and also just friends of mine, who had to apply for dozens and dozens of jobs, and it must be really soul destroying because the forms are huge and each one for each school is different. So you can't, it's not like in outside of teaching you just send your CV, so you just have one copy of it and you send it out. The forms are massive, really detailed, and you have to write like personal statements and stuff, which I hate doing. So I did that, and then I had my interview. So the way it worked at my school was I taught a lesson to a class I'd never met before. For me, it was top set year 8. It was just a single standalone lesson. So they had been doing, I think they'd been doing Gothic writing, and I taught them poetry for a lesson. I taught them Grace Nicholls' Island Man, which is a really, really fab poem. I taught that lesson observed by the head teacher and the deputy head who were interviewing me. I then waited in the staff room for a bit while they talked about my lesson, the two of them. Then I went in for panel interview, then sat back in the staff room for a bit longer, and then they called me in. And I was offered the job in the room, which is something that I haven't had before, but apparently it's really common in teaching. So yeah, that was the process. And because it was a school I already knew, it was a lot shorter than it would be if it was a school I didn't know. So if you go into a school that you don't know, you have like a whole day there, you do a tour of the school, you might have a panel of students asking you questions, you teach a lesson, you have a panel interview, and all that stuff. So yeah, it was definitely a streamlined process for me, for which I am very grateful. And yeah, I absolutely love my school. I can't wait to get stuck in September. Okay, what else did I want to talk about? Job application, next steps. So I am now what is called an ECT, which is Early Careers Teacher. It used to be NQT, which is Newly Qualified Teacher, which I think I prefer, but there we go. I will be an ECT for the next 2 years, which basically means that, a bit like when you pass your driving test and you go from an L plate to a P plate, I will have P plates for the next 2 years. It means I still have assessments to do. Oh, I didn't talk about assessments. I'll talk about that in a minute. You still have assessments to do. I will still get observed, but not as much. I think it's once a fortnight, formal observation. Doesn't really matter. But I will be a full teacher. I've got a very full timetable. And obviously have responsibility for those classes. I'm also going to be a year 7 tutor, which I'm really excited about because they'll be new to the school. And then hopefully the way the school does it is that you move up the school with that tutor group. So hopefully I'll be with those kids until they're 16 and in year 11, which will be really wonderful to watch, I'm sure. So that's kind of what comes next. And then I'm just going to flip back to assessments because, as usual on this channel, it's all very smooth. There are 3 big essays, your 3 like assessment points through the year. The first one was on SEND teaching, so special educational needs and disabilities, and inclusion. The second one, what was the second one on? So the first one was in October, November time before Christmas. Then we had another one that was due at Easter and I can't remember what it was. And then the third one was due in May. And what was that about? I really can't remember. It's only a few months ago. But there's like three essay points, and the essays get bigger. I think the biggest one was 6,000 words, which was the final one. And then you also have regular meetings with your university tutor and your school mentor, to make sure that you're meeting the teacher standards, and evidence. You have to collect evidence. So there are 7 teaching standards, she said really confidently. 7? Yeah. And you have to collect evidence for each of those. I really know what I'm talking about, guys. I'm like an expert. Yeah, you have to collect evidence for each of those all the time. And then at the checkpoints, you have to present your evidence. You have to have a certain amount of evidence per standard. So most of the time it was 2 or 3 pieces of evidence per standard. And you have to keep that going all the time. So yeah, you have to evidence, and that will continue when I'm in ECT as well in the next 2 years. Okay, and then I had some questions. I asked for questions on Instagram to see if there was anything specific people wanted me to cover. So we'll go through those. Somebody asked me, and I wrote down the questions, but I didn't write down who asked it, so I apologise. Somebody asked for the top 5 tips for people that are going to do their PGCE. So let's think about this. First of all, number 1, accept it is going to be hard. Just accept it. It's a hard job. Training is hard. Like I said, it's stressful. It can be soul destroying. It's all consuming. It's also the best job ever. But just accept it will be hard. And I feel like that makes it easier, because if you go in expecting it to be like this hard, and then even if it's only like this much, it's not quite as bad as you think. So accept it's going to be hard, number 1. Number 2 is it takes a village. It really, really, really does. I could not have got through the last year without my husband. He has been completely amazing. He has cooked every single night. We used to share the cooking after work, but he's cooked every single night because I'm so exhausted, physically and mentally drained by the time I get home. I just cannot function. So he's made sure that I eat properly. He has hugged me when I've needed it. He's also given me the occasional kick up the backside when I've been like wallowing over something. He's endlessly been my cheerleader, and I could not have coped without him. He's also made sure that I take breaks, and yeah, genuinely would not have got through this year without him and his support. But also just my friends and family in general have been amazing, and just like understanding that I just don't have the capacity for anything else while I'm teaching, and then being understanding has been amazing. So it takes a village, so make sure you've got good people around you and lean on them. It's okay to ask for help, it's okay to need help, it's okay to be exhausted, but it does take a village. So that's number 2. Number 3, be organised. You need to be organised for this job, and you need to be organised to get through the course. So be organised, write lists, make sure you read ahead, look ahead at what's coming next. You always need to be thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of what's coming. So be organised, make sure you meet your deadlines, that kind of stuff. That would be number 3. Number 4 is to have a teaching persona. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, because I've got another question that this feeds into. But have a teaching persona. I found it really helps. It helps you differentiate between at home and at work. And that also helps you switch off. So yeah, have a teaching persona. And number 5, make sure you take breaks. Take breaks. You need to make sure that you are recharging as much as you can, even if it's only a little bit. And I definitely get to the end of term and I'm on a flat battery, because weekends are not enough to fully recharge. But even if you just recharge this much, it's better than nothing. So take breaks. It's really important. It's so easy to get sucked into working till midnight every night and working through your weekends, but if you do that, you will not be your best teaching self, and you won't make it through with your mental health intact. So please take breaks, try and make sure you get enough sleep. So yeah, those would be my top 5 tips. Then somebody else said, how do you balance self-care and workload? And this kind of feeds into what I was just saying. Being organised helps, but also having a really strict routine helps. So I get home from school, I am generally one of the first people into school, because I work much better first thing in the morning. So I will get to school around 7:30, because it means I have at least an hour of quiet before everybody else piles in. And I will spend that time writing lessons for the following day, getting ready for the day ahead, so the day that I'm in, making sure I've got all my resources printed, and making sure I've got notes and I've got my timings right and all that kind of thing, and just going over what I'm doing in the day, and just kind of getting my head in the game. Then I will teach all day until 3:30. I always leave at 3:45. I'm always out the door, as soon as the kids have gone, I'm always out, because I would just prefer to be at home in the afternoons working, and my school is happy for staff to do that. So I will always leave straight away. It takes me about 45 minutes to get home, so I'll get home about 4:30. When I come in, I would generally have a full debrief in the kitchen with Gary. He's currently working from home, working in the kitchen, so we'll have a good chat about our day. The poor man gets everything that happened to me in the entire day, but it just helps me to like decompress a bit, and like we'll quite often talk things through if I'm struggling with something. So we'll have a debrief in the kitchen while I make us both a snack and a drink and stuff. Then I'll go upstairs into my office, and the first thing I do is completely empty my school bag. As a side note, if you guys want a like what's in my school bag type video, then let me know. I think that's quite an old school YouTube type video, but if you fancy it, let me know and I'll do it. Empty out my bag completely, and then I will sit at my desk and get ready for the following day. So I will finish writing any lessons that I didn't write in the morning for the next day, get timings right, write myself a list for like what I need printing the next day, and then repack my bag so everything is ready. And that will usually take me up to about 6 o'clock. And at 6 o'clock I stop working. And I've had a few people say to me, I don't know how you get it all done, but that is my cut-off point. And there have been a few times when I've needed to work a bit longer than that, particularly towards the end of term when there's loads of marking, because all the classes are doing their end of term assessments and there's loads of marking and data that needs putting in. So I have worked later, but usually 6 o'clock is my cut-off point, and then I will get changed, and well, I usually have either a bath or a shower at that point, get changed and come down, and then that's our evening. And that for me has been really important, is having that balance and that time to switch off. Somebody else also asked me about how I fit reading in. For me, reading is absolutely something I have to do. It's non-negotiable part of my self-care, and I will read in the evenings rather than watching TV. I don't watch much TV. I watch a bit of Gogglebox on a Friday, quite like that, but generally speaking I don't watch TV, I read. So I'll spend the evening, I say the evening because I come down at 6, we'll have dinner, and then if I'm in the real thick of the term, there have been plenty of times where I'm in bed and asleep by 7:30. And if you need to go to bed and go to sleep at 7:30, do it. Like, just do whatever you need to do. So I'll read for an hour or so, and then I'll either go to bed or read a bit more and just hang on the sofa with Gary. And I found like having those boundaries is really important. And I would rather work a shorter day in the week and work a bit at weekends, because I try not to work at weekends, but like I said, if I've got marking to do, I will do that on a Saturday when I'm like fresh and I've had a bit of sleep and all that kind of stuff, so that when I come to my marking, I'm not just like, oh yeah, whatever, grade, there we go. I want to mark properly for my kids. So yeah, so that's how I kind of balance those out. And then the last question was, did you experience imposter syndrome? Yes, I struggle with imposter syndrome just in general, and I've talked about this before on my channel. But what I found was having a teaching persona is really, really helpful, and it's basically fake it till you make it. Like I said, I struggle with imposter syndrome in general, and the way that I deal with that in general is fake it till you make it, and I just took that and applied it to teaching. So I have a teaching persona where I am Miss, and obviously then my surname, but I'm not going to say that on the internet, and she comes out, it sounds really weird, this is going to make me sound like a lunatic, she comes out when I put my watch on, my staff lanyard and my glasses. As soon as those 3 things are on, I am Miss. And I found that to be really helpful, especially on days where I'm feeling wobbly, because teaching and anxiety are 2 things that don't always go very well together, and I've had plenty of really high anxiety days where it's all felt really difficult. But I found that just by breaking it down and taking it one lesson at a time, I only plan 1 lesson in advance, because particularly with teaching English in secondary school, like the lesson doesn't always go to plan, and sometimes I'll finish a lesson and we're only halfway through what I wanted to get through. So I learned really quickly to only plan a day in advance. So, you know, on a Monday I plan for Tuesday, on Tuesday I plan for Wednesday, etc, etc, because otherwise I was just wasting time, because I was planning for stuff that we didn't get to, and then I'm frustrated. So it's just better to go 1 lesson at a time, and breaking it down that way has really, really helped me. But yeah, for the imposter syndrome, I would really recommend having a teaching persona, because it really helped me. That was everything that I wanted to cover. Those are the questions that I had on Instagram. If there's other stuff that you guys want me to talk about, drop me a comment below and I will obviously comment you back. If I get, several questions, then I'll do another video on this. If you want me, like I said, if you want me to do a what's in my teaching bag video, I can do that. But yeah, I hope this gives you a bit more of an idea of what I've been doing this year and the process, and yeah, hopefully it was interesting. If you made it this far, leave me an apple emoji. apple of your colour, just leave me an apple emoji so I know that you made it to the end of the video. Please subscribe if you would like more of this chaos, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks guys, bye!